So what lures are truly best for bass fishing in the month of October? Crankbaits, swim baits, topwater, jigs and Texas rigs, banjo minnow? You know what, scratch the last one. Although depending on where you live, maybe. And as much as I would like to answer yes to any of those lure categories, the month of October has so much variance in terms of weather and water conditions depending on where you live in the country, and so a simple top 5 lure list isn't gonna cut it. So in this video, I'm gonna break down my top 3 bass fishing lures for each region of the country, southern, central, and northern, to help you guys become better anglers and catch more fish this month. My name's Tyler, and let's talk about it. Another giant, another giant. Look at that, y'all. I can't believe what I just caught. Yes! Well, welcome back to TRF. My name is Tyler, and if you enjoy bass fishing and learning about how to become a better angler, you have found the right place. We have an awesome community here, so go ahead and hit the subscribe button somewhere to join the team. So October, a month where the average temperature in Florida is still in the mid-80s, sometimes even 90s, and in New York, we're talking about 50s, low 60s. It is a wide variance of weather and water patterns, and so that means that, like I said, a top list of lures doesn't really work, so I have to talk about all the regions of the country to make sure you guys are well covered to understand your bodies of water and catch more fish. So let's start with the first region and the first list of lures being where I live, down here in the southern region. Now, October in the south is probably the second hardest month of the year to catch a bass, September being the hardest and July not too far in third place. And I would just say that you have to understand the fish are not super predictable during this time of the year. Unlike the pre-spawn and the spawn in the summer where they have these patterns that go, the fall, which October, I guess depending on where you live. Florida, October, I mean, it's still hot, but Texas, we finally start having a few, and when I say Texas, I mean the South. So, you know, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, that whole kind of southern region there. We have a few minor cold fronts, and then maybe one major cold front throughout the month of October. And when I say cold front, I don't always mean super crazy high winds that disturb your body of water and leave the air temperatures and water temperatures crazy cold. I just mean the nighttime temperatures kind of bleeding into the daytime temperatures tend to drop, especially nighttime being more important than day, and that drops the water temperatures just enough and affects the water clarity just enough to change how your bass react. So we're gonna talk about my first category for bass fishing in the southern region, and that is topwater. Now, the two main types of topwater you saw on the screen there are topwater hard plastic walking baits and topwater frogs. Now, if you have followed my channel for any amount of time, you know these are my two favorite topwaters, and it's because they are so dang versatile. Now, when we get to the central region and the northern, I'm actually gonna discuss some other different types of topwaters, but these two specifically, I think make a whole lot of sense for the south in October because some of us have bass that have started to move on to bait fish centered patterns. So threadfin and gizzard shad, and mostly though not gizzard, the smaller types of bait fish. And that's where a walking bait, specifically, I like the Strike King Sexy Dog Jr. It is actually a 2 treble hook topwater. I like this thing because it actually imitates much more size-wise what the bass are eating. But if you don't have a whole lot of open water on your pond, there's still a ton of vegetation, or you're just fishing a pond or a lake that has a bunch of lay down logs and just shallow cover, a topwater frog, kind of regardless of region, again, it applies to central and north during this time of the year, the frog is going to be the best topwater. But you really have to decipher on your specific fishing day whether your fish A, are in the mood to chase topwater at all. If they're not, we'll get to the other lures on the list here in a second. But if they are, whether they are more open water bait fish chasers or more shallow water bluegill chasers, because a frog, spoiler alert, does not imitate a frog the majority of the time. It actually imitates a bluegill. So topwater, do not limit it out. I would say November in the south is kind of the last time that I throw a topwater. Not a whole lot, especially if you've had multiple cold fronts, but October, for sure, I'm still throwing topwater lures. And if your pond or lake has a pocket or a creek that goes kind of off the main lake, make sure you at least try that at some point during the day, because sometimes fish will have pushed bait fish or followed them back into that area, and a walking bait, even in like the middle of the channel where you wouldn't think a bass would come up to eat topwater, those fish sometimes, I've seen it on live scope year after year, are just cruising, sometimes within 5 feet of the water surface. And so a topwater, while it may seem kind of off the wall to just throw out in the middle, it's actually not a bad idea. So topwater's going away. My lure number 2, or category number 2, is going to be one of many finesse lures, but I really think this one right here, the Wacky Rig, is one of the best. And there are a few main reasons why I prefer a wacky rig as opposed to even my skunk buster, which we're gonna cover here in a second, in most ponds and lakes across October. And that is because I see a lot of fish cruising the banks. That's right, with my eye scope, using my eyeballs and my polarized sunglasses. I'm not saying that a bait fish colored or a bluegill colored caffeine shad, AKA a soft plastic fluke, couldn't catch fish in that environment. I just think a wacky rig being a little bit heavier and kind of more centered in terms of its weight distribution is a little easier to make pinpoint casts and especially flips with, both on bait casting and on spinning gear. And the speed at which it falls definitely entices bass that are more visual feeders during October. And I have seen this time and time again. July, August, September, they don't really cruise the shallows a whole lot in the south, but something about October, those first few cold fronts, bait fish being a little more shallow in your bodies of water, if you keep your eyes open, you're actually gonna see bass cruising up shallow, almost like they do in the pre-spawn, and a wacky rig is a great way to catch those fish. I prefer the 5-inch Strike King Ocho. If I'm going in the pre-spawn, I know there's more big fish moving up shallow to prepare to spawn than there are in the fall. Fall, I found the big fish tend to stay more out deep. You're actually going to catch bigger fish on a topwater walking bait or a crankbait or an underspin out in the middle than you would a wacky rig up shallow, at least during the fall. But there's still going to be plenty of fish to catch, and I think the 5-inch is the best size for that. And of course, I will have all my tackle linked in the video description. Make sure you guys use those links. They are affiliate links. It would help my channel continue to grow. And I've got the VMC. I believe this is a size 1 aught? No, Size 1, I gotta check that. Now, many of the reasons why I love a wacky rig for the month of October in the South are the same exact reasons why I still love my other favorite weightless soft plastic in October, and that is the weightless soft plastic jerkbait. My favorite being the Strike King Caffeine Shad in the 4-inch variety. I still throw the 5 where I know bigger bait fish are present, but I think a 4-inch, especially in ponds from the bank in a kayak for bass that are feeding on smaller bait fish, is just a perfect imitation size. I will have my favorite bluegill imitation color and my favorite bait fish imitation color linked down below. Now, why is this lure and the wacky rig on my list of lures for October in the South? And that is because fishing can tend to be really tough. The fish sometimes have not, depending on the weather, transitioned to a fall aggressive feeding behavior patterns. And so you still have to go finesse to catch a lot of those fish, but I still want to get myself fishing shallower than I did in July, August, and September. So can you still catch them on a drop shot? Absolutely. A Nico rig? Absolutely. A football jig? Yes, you can. If that works in your pond, absolutely go for it. I'm just telling you guys from experience, a lot of fish eventually in October. It may not be until stinking the Halloween day that those fish are moving shallow, but technically it's still October. And so because of that, I want more shallow-oriented soft plastics that fit in the finesse category, and that's why the Caffeine Shad, my skunk buster for everywhere that I fish, belongs on this list. And not just this list, it also belongs in the central and the northern, but I feel like it had to fit somewhere, and so I'm gonna talk about it now, but again, it applies to stinking every angler. I truly believe the Caffeine Shad is a stinking cheat code to catch more bass. And speaking of fishing cheat codes, I want to talk about the Bass Forecast app. Bass Forecast is an awesome mobile app that allows you to actually plan your fishing trips up to 10 days advance with their Bass Forecast rating. Now, Tyler, how the heck does a fishing app help me plan which days to go fishing? How does it even know? How does this magic juju even work? Well, we actually have a weather-based algorithm built upon the life cycle of a bass that updates second by second to make sure it knows how the bass on your body of water should be behaving, the season those bass are in, the peak feeding times based on the moon phase, and a list of recommended locations to fish and lures to throw, as well as retrieve speeds, and a list of instructional videos made by yours truly teaching you guys how to properly fish every single main lure category. Now, that is awesome, but the number one reason I use Bass Forecast, and I'm excited about it all the time as a co-owner of the company, is that we help you with the 10-day in advance rating system actually choose the best possible days to go bass fishing. Now, am I gonna promise if the rating says 10 for 5 days from now, you're gonna have the best fishing day of your life? Absolutely not. Everything in fishing is up to the fish, but we've done a ton of work to make sure it's as accurate as possible, almost like a batting average, that every time you decide to go bass fishing, you're at least putting more effort and thought into your planning, and Bass Forecast helps a ton with that. So I will have the app linked down below. Again, I'm a co-owner in the company. I'm a huge believer in it, and I had a part in building it. So I will leave it down below. That's enough talking. Let's get to region number 2, and that is the central region. Now, this region will get a few more minor cold fronts for sure than the south, and maybe 2 to 3 major cold fronts depending on how far north in that central region you are. And so knowing this, here are my top 3 lures for when it comes to the central region, starting once again with topwater. Now, you'll probably notice that the lures are not totally identical to the ones I recommended for the southern region. That is because in the central region, your vegetation will start to die off a little bit more than it has in the south. And so covering water, that means throwing lures far away from you, either out of the bank, out of the kayak, or out of the bass boat, and getting them back to you and making another cast over and over and over again as you're probably moving your body or moving your watercraft extra fast. That is what covering water means. You want to throw lures that can do that effectively. So a walking bait, especially a small one, I still recommend, but a buzz bait is one that I would definitely pick up if I lived in the central region. And again, you can fish any of these in any region. I'm just going with the ones that I think would help most people in the region you live. And a buzzbait, either a straight white one or a straight black one. I like buzzbaits that don't have a skirt. They just have a toad or a swim bait or a menace grub on the bottom. That is my favorite type of buzzbait, but again, whatever works for you. And the great thing about a buzzbait as opposed to a topwater frog, I guess besides like a plopping frog of some kind, is that you can actually cover water a lot faster, and it is much more loud. So if you have dirty water because of cold fronts that kind of pushed wind in and now your water is nasty, a buzzbait is usually the only topwater that can still actually be effective, especially in that nasty water. So walking bait for when you can actually see, or you know based on electronics they are feeding on bait fish, fish it in wide open areas. A buzz bait, you can still fish it wide open, but it's especially good around a ton of wood, a ton of rocks, and a ton of shallow, sometimes dying off grass. Now, if it's totally dead, fish don't want to be around that because it doesn't actually put any oxygen into the water, and believe it or not, fish actually breathe oxygen through the water, and so you need to be covering water as fast as possible. That's why I throw these 2 topwaters as my main ones in the central region. Now, if topwater is not working for you in your region, you're gonna have to go to something subsurface, and my favorite thing during this time of the year in your central region is going to be small crankbaits. And my 3 main crankbaits for this area of the country are going to be the Strike King 1.0. It is a very small crankbait, best thrown on BFS setups or spinning rod. I have a really hard time casting this light and small of a crankbait on a regular bait casting setup. Then you have the Strike King 1.5 crankbait and kind of a 2.5-ish shape, and that is the Strike King Hybrid Hunter Jr. You can throw flat-sided crankbaits. You can throw big old wide wobbling square bills. As long as it is a smaller size bait fish imitator, you're good to go. But if I'm gonna choose one of these 3 to throw, and I've got mostly aquatic vegetation in my pond or lake, I'm gonna go with the Hybrid Hunter because as opposed to a square bill, the Hybrid Hunter just comes out of grass a lot more cleanly, especially if your grass is starting to die off, becoming brown and nasty. It's not going to, the hooks aren't going to be able to rip out of that grass super easily. And so the Hybrid Hunter being, again, A, better around grass in general due to its action, but B, it just floats a whole lot faster, which gets it over that grass, over those snags. It is the best crankbait, in my opinion, for anywhere around the country during the month of October. Again, similar to the caffeine shad in that it works everywhere, the Hybrid Hunter can as well, but especially in the central region, your bass should be really keyed in on bait fish. I'm not gonna say they're like going to the backs of the pockets as all the pro anglers like to talk about. They're just gonna find bait fish wherever they can. Main lake, pocket, point, hump, whatever, and a Hybrid Hunter is a great way to do that. I would say you wanna be making contact with the bottom or dang near close to it, so anything from 5 foot or shallower is a good place to throw the Hybrid Hunter, and just cast and retrieve as fast as you can. Cover some water until you find where they're located, and especially if there's bait fish around, keep trying different sizes of crankbaits, or maybe go to a vibrating jig or a small spinner bait. You're gonna eventually find what the fish want. If there's bait fish, there's probably fish present. And the last lure in this category that honestly belongs in all of them, but I feel like we got to talk about it here most, and that is the vibrating jig. If you follow the 100 Pond series, you've seen that I throw a vibrating jig, the Strike King Tungsten Thunder Cricket, in almost every single pond I go to, and especially when it comes to fall fishing, that is no different. Oh, I dropped it. There is just something extra special about this size bait, especially the 3/8 ounce version, and I love the fact that the all-white one, which I throw in dirtier water, and the bluegill one that I throw in clear water, don't have a standard black blade, which a lot of vibrating jigs have. I have a chrome blade on the white one, and a very shiny gold blade on the bluegill one, and I just think, as bass have seen so many vibrating jigs throughout the spring and summer and early fall, once October rolls around, not only do you have less anglers on your bodies of water because of football season and hunting season, but I think these two blade colors actually help me catch more fish, and it's just a good bait to cover water with. Again, if you think the crankbait is not quite weedless enough, it doesn't stay high enough in the water column, a vibrating jig, especially a 3/8 ounce, can be kept up higher in the water column, and especially when you're target casting at clumps of vegetation or reed patches or lily pad fields that are still alive and healthy, it's a great way to cover water fast, but still effectively fish those areas and really present two lures that look a whole lot like what the bass may be eating in your bodies of water. Especially in the central region, you have a good mixture of bait fish as well as bluegills. And one lure that I think is kind of a wild card, a number 4 for this region, especially if you've got rocks and clear water, and that is the shaky head. Imagine this, a cold front has just rolled through. You've gone from having a fantastic hybrid hunter bite, vibrating jig bite, and all of a sudden it is bluebird skies, it is dead calm, and you just can't figure out where the heck the fish went. Well, oftentimes they either pushed out into the middle and they are suspending on bait fish, which then the old caffeine shad or a hard plastic jerkbait can catch them. Top water, usually not, even though it may only be like 2 foot above their face. They're probably not gonna bite that thing after a cold front, but some of them will go all the way down to the bottom and just chill down there until the cold front has kind of fully passed and the body of water can reach some kind of equilibrium. A shaky head, as opposed to a drop shot, is my go-to for October in this region. I'm thinking about lakes like Table Rock, Lake of the Ozarks, Kentucky Lake, a whole bunch of your kind of harder bottom lakes in that central region. Tons of stuff in East Tennessee, Douglas, Cherokee. A shaky head is going to be a fantastic lake, and not to mention all the good hard bodies of water that are ponds and lakes you fish. And even I would say mud, but especially not grass. But anytime you got hard bottom composition in your body of water in October, a shaky head will catch you more fish and can be a skunk buster oftentimes when the other ones I go to do not. Now moving on to the last region, you guys who live up north, to be honest, you probably have the most productive region for bass fishing entirely in the month of October, and it's probably not even close. Northern region definitely gets the most cold front action out of all 3 regions, and that really starts to knock down your water temperatures into the 50s, sometimes even 40s I've seen in some bodies of water, and really starts to kill your aquatic vegetation. So finding healthy grass is super crucial, but your bass, for sure in October, as long as you have them, are going to be focused on bait fish, and if not, they are up shallow, gorging themselves on bluegill. And so what is my category number 1? It's still top water. And you'll notice here, I put basically every type of topwater on the screen besides a popper, and to be honest, that probably still could work because every type of topwater really is beneficial for you guys that live up in the north. Now, while most of your ponds and lakes are not bait fish dependent, and by bait fish, I mean like threadfin and small, like little minnows, perch, I would not really call a bait fish. That's more like a fish of prey. And so because of the vast amount of bluegill you'll have in your bodies of water, I've added back in the frog and the topwater plopper, especially because smallmouth bass cannot handle themselves around a plopper. I'm not saying it can't work in the south or in the central in October. It just is especially good for you smallie chasers to be throwing this thing around during the entire month of October. Like I said, you really have to try it all during this month. That's why I have all of them, but especially the topwater frog around around whatever reed clumps you guys still have, or on the screen I'll show what a reed clump looks like. If you've still got some of those alive in your body of water that have a little bit of depth on them, I'm talking like 3 to 4 feet, those fish can really school up on those things, and you can catch multiple fish off of one reed clump as long as you pick it apart correctly, starting with the outsides and then casting as far in as you can. Topwater frog being the best and probably the only lure applicable for that kind of fishing, but you really just have to find the most healthy aquatic vegetation, and a topwater frog is gonna catch you fish in the north in October. In November, it's kind of getting pretty dang cold. Those fish have started to move out deep a little bit, but October, you're still good to go. Now, my next lure, and one that you're probably thinking, Tyler, how have you forgotten about this for the fall? I didn't. I just think it's most applicable up north, and that is a spinnerbait. This lure category right here, especially one with double willow leaf blades, or really willow leaf for Indiana, not Colorado for the most part, is going to be an incredibly effective lure for you guys that live up north. I don't care if they are feeding on perch, on gobies, on baitfish, or on bluegill. They are feeding on stuff that looks like the components of a spinnerbait. And the feature that's best about a spinnerbait is that it is the most weedless of any moving reaction bait lure. So a crankbait, of course, it hooked itself here. It's got treble hooks. It snags most kinds of grasses and sticks and logs unless you know how to kind of work it effectively through that. A vibrating jig, even though it has a very similar hook to a spinnerbait in terms of both of them being faced up, vibrating jigs, when they hit a piece of cover down there, like a log, they will turn over and oftentimes snag themselves. A spinnerbait, especially with a small trailer on the back, I have the Mach schooler, my favorite little spinnerbait trailer, they have a tendency when they hit something to kind of bump over and then roll over, and by that time the hook's already past that log or that stick or that grass. And so if you have tons of stuff floating in your body of water, maybe your lake turned over and you've got just tons of stuff floating in the water column, and especially dying grass, shallow cover, that kind of stuff is perfect for a spinnerbait. That, again, I'm not saying other reaction baits couldn't work. I just think a spinnerbait works especially good for you guys up north. And just like I recommended the topwater plopper style, the spinnerbait is fantastic for angry smallmouth, especially long casts over windy areas. If you're like confused why the smallmouth stopped biting a drop shot in a Ned rig or a tube, go up shallow, find you some rock flats and throw a spinnerbait, and just get ready to have your arm torn off. Oh God. Especially if your bass are feeding on perch, a spinnerbait on a windy day can work absolute wonders. And the last lure category that I want to implore you guys to use in the northern region during this month is going to be the Ned rig and the jig. Now, Tyler, these are two different lures. I know you've made videos about both of them. Why are you combining them in the same category? Well, because these are the two that are best used around open water, as in like there's no grass or sticks or whatever, and hard bottom, which you guys in the north will start to experience earlier than guys in the central and the south regions, because your grass and stuff starts to die off a little earlier. So if you've got an area that had maybe a big grass flat, but now the grass has started to die off, maybe some carp have kind of eaten the grass, and you've got more open spots, casting a Ned rig around those edges of grass where it's less of like a sloping edge where you get snagged and more of a hard edge, Ned rig can be a fantastic finesse version of the jig. I know the jig is a skirt, the Ned rig doesn't, but they kind of do the same thing, which is get hopped off the bottom and maintain contact vastly more than any other weightless soft plastic or Carolina rig. The jig and the Ned rig are pretty much work the exact same, even though one is finesse and one is technically not, unless you were to take a jig and make it a finesse jig, but you know what I mean. Well, my goodness, folks, that was a lot of information. Hopefully you learned something from this video. As always, I will leave my tackle and the Bass Forecast app linked down below. And if you want to watch my Hybrid Hunter instructional video, I've talked at length about why this crankbait, it's currently stuck to the others, but why this crankbait here is a fantastic one all across the country. I will leave it up here. And if you want to learn my Ned rig masterclass, talking all about why this little nugget of gold right here is so good for bass fishing, I will leave that up here in this corner. My name is Tyler. As always, it's a pleasure, and we'll see y'all next time right here on TRF.